My friend has been impersonating another person all this time, but no one can imagine how it all turned out. Okay, so this is going to sound crazy, but I really need to talk about what happened. I honestly don't know where to even begin, but I guess the best place to start is at the beginning. I've known Sarah my whole life. We were literally next door neighbors as kids. From the moment we met, we just clicked. She was the kind of friend who showed up when you needed her, the one who would stay up all night on the phone, talking about everything and nothing. We shared everything, our hopes, our fears, our dumb little secrets. We'd swap clothes, finish each other's sentences, and plan trips together like we were already grown ups. If you had asked me, I would have told you Sarah was the one person in my life I could count on forever. But a few months ago, something started to shift, and I didn't notice it right away because, well, I didn't want to. At first, it was just small stuff, like she'd cancel plans last minute. No big deal, right? People get busy. But then, it kept happening. Every time we made plans, something came up. Either she was too tired, or too busy with work, or she'd just straight up cancel last minute with some half-hearted excuse. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, we all go through those phases where life gets overwhelming. But, I don't know, I guess I was hoping it was just a phase. Then came the day when we were hanging out at my place. It was nothing special, just the two of us on the couch, eating junk food, watching some random Netflix show. We've done this 1,000 times, but this time, when I mentioned her family, like how her little brother had been talking about joining a soccer team, or how her parents were going on that vacation, Sarah's face went completely blank. And I'm not talking about a, I forgot kind of look. It was different. Like I had said something that didn't even make sense to her. For a split second, she just stared at me, and then she quickly changed the subject. I didn't say anything because, honestly, I was confused. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe she was just tired or distracted. But something in that moment felt wrong. It wasn't just forgetting a detail. It was like she didn't recognize the life I was talking about. I pushed it to the back of my mind. A few days later, though, things got worse. I had been texting Sarah about meeting up, and I accidentally bumped into one of her high school friends at the coffee shop. Now, I don't talk to this girl much, but she's always been friendly with me. I mentioned Sarah and asked how she was doing, and the woman looked at me like I was speaking a different language. She had no idea who I was talking about. She even asked, "Sarah who?" And I froze. I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding, so I texted Sarah right away, asking if she knew this person. Her response? A one-word text. Who? At that point, I felt this sinking feeling in my gut. That was when I started to feel like something was off, like I wasn't the one who had the whole story. So, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I decided to confront her. I went to her place, unannounced. I know, maybe that was impulsive, but something just didn't sit right. She looked surprised when she opened the door, like she wasn't expecting me. I asked her flat out, "What's going on, Sarah? Why are you acting so weird? Why does it feel like you're avoiding me?" And I swear, the look in her eyes was one of pure panic. She didn't say anything for a long moment, just stared at me like she was calculating how to respond. Then, she said something that changed everything. "I'm not Sarah." It took a second for her words to even register in my brain. What the hell was she talking about? Of course, you're Sarah, I thought. We've known each other since we were kids. But the way she said it, The way her voice cracked slightly made my heart skip a beat, and that's when everything broke. The whole Katie not recognizing Sarah thing kept me up for the next few nights. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than I was seeing. It didn't make sense. Sarah and I had been best friends for years, and for someone who was supposed to be so close to her, someone she'd spent years talking to, it was impossible to imagine not recognizing her name. But there was still that part of me trying to rationalize it. Maybe Katie really was just forgetful, or maybe she was just weird that day. People forget things all the time, right? Maybe Sarah had been distant because she was going through something private, personal stuff that she didn't want to talk about. But then, the next few days just got stranger. I'd try to reach out to Sarah, and she'd either not respond at all, or when she did, it felt like she was brushing me off. She started getting really good at avoiding direct answers. If I asked her about her job, she'd say, "Same old stuff. Work is fine." If I brought up anything about her family, she'd say, "I'll tell you about it later." Later never came. Then came the phone call that really messed with my head. I was sitting at home one evening, scrolling through Instagram when I got a text from Sarah. It was just a quick message. "Hey, can you call me? Need to talk to you about something important." Okay, so that got my attention. Sarah never asked me to call her unless it was something serious. I dialed her number and waited, but when she picked up, her voice sounded different, like just off. She didn't sound like herself. Her tone was flatter, colder. I immediately asked, "Are you okay? You sound weird." She laughed, but it wasn't her usual carefree laugh. "I'm fine, just stressed. Work stuff. You know how it is." But the way she said it made me feel like she was trying too hard to sound normal. I let it go, but I was starting to feel like I was chasing a ghost. Nothing was adding up. Why was she so distant all of a sudden? Why was she shutting me out when we'd always been so close? I decided I needed answers. I couldn't just let it slide anymore. So I did something I wasn't proud of. I started snooping. I went through Sarah's social media, checking everything from her posts to her tagged photos, trying to find something that would explain her strange behavior. I wasn't proud of it, but I was desperate. But that's when I found something I wasn't expecting. I was looking through her old Facebook posts when I noticed something that hadn't registered before. There was a post from her mom, dated 2 months ago, congratulating Sarah on coming home safely after her trip. The trip? The one Sarah never mentioned? The one she hadn't talked about at all? It didn't make sense. It was like she had just disappeared for a few weeks. I quickly messaged her mom, asking about the post, trying to keep it casual. "Hey, I saw your post about Sarah coming back from her trip. Was that fun?" Her response came a few minutes later, but it wasn't what I expected. She said, "Sarah? She hasn't been home in over a year." I stared at the screen. What? I reread her message a few times, trying to make sense of it. I immediately called Sarah's mom, but when I tried to get in touch, the phone just kept ringing. My heart was pounding in my chest. I had to know what was going on. What was happening to my best friend? The words from Sarah's mom kept echoing in my mind. I kept trying to make sense of it, but the more I thought about it, the less it added up. I'd just seen Sarah. I just talked to her. How could that be possible? I needed answers. I called Sarah's mom again, trying to stay calm, but I could feel my voice shaking. When she answered, her tone was different, distant, almost resigned. I asked about Sarah, and before I could get far, she said it again, matter-of-factly. "Sarah died in a car accident last year." I froze. I couldn't breathe. What? No, I just saw her last week, I stammered. My mind was racing, unable to process her words. She didn't hesitate. I'm sorry, honey, but it's the truth. I thought you knew. Sarah's been gone for over a year. I couldn't understand. Who had I been talking to then? The person I'd spent countless hours with, laughed with, cried with. They were gone? This couldn't be real. My whole world started to tilt. I ended the call quickly, my head spinning. I needed confirmation. I reached out to a few friends who'd known Sarah, but they all said the same thing. Yeah, Sarah's been gone for a while. It hit me like a ton of bricks. How had I not known? Why had no one told me? Then I saw the text. It was from Sarah's number. I almost didn't want to open it, but I did. It wasn't a typical, "Hey, what's up?" text. It was blunt, cold. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out like this, but I can't keep lying anymore. I stared at the screen. And then, another message. I'm not Sarah. I never was. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The person I thought was my best friend, the person I had trusted for years, wasn't Sarah at all. It was all a lie. I was numb, heart racing. Who was I talking to all this time? And why? I stared at my phone, feeling like the world was slipping away. The truth was clear now. The person I had thought was Sarah for all these years was a complete stranger. But the question gnawed at me. Who was she? And why had she done this? My mind was spinning. The message had been blunt, but there was no way this was some kind of mistake. I needed answers. I couldn't just sit here in the dark, pretending that nothing had happened. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I tried calling Sarah's number, hoping for some kind of response, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again, and again, but nothing. That left me with only one option, going to her place. I hadn't been there in a while, but I knew where she lived. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, my stomach a tight knot of nerves. Every step I took felt heavier than the last. I tried to tell myself that maybe, just maybe, I'd find some explanation. Maybe she had some kind of reason for doing this. Maybe she had been in danger. Maybe... But when I got to her apartment, the door was locked. No lights. No sounds. I knocked, waited, and then knocked again. No answer. I stood there, staring at the door. My hands shook. It didn't make sense. This was the place where we had spent countless hours together, laughing and talking about our lives. And now? Now it was just another reminder of everything I had lost. I stood there for a long time, just staring, until I remembered the key she had given me years ago, one she'd said was for emergencies. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled for it. When the door creaked open, the emptiness inside felt like it swallowed me whole. The apartment was bare. I mean, completely empty. The furniture was gone. The walls, once adorned with pictures of our memories, were now just blank. The space felt cold, lifeless. It was then that I noticed something on the counter, a small, folded piece of paper. It looked out of place, like it had been left for me on purpose. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but I recognized the message immediately. I'm sorry, Jenna. I never meant to hurt you, but I had to keep up the lie. I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I wasn't Sarah. I was someone else, someone you didn't know. You'll never understand why I did this, but I couldn't stop. I stared at the note, completely at a loss. Who was this person? Why had they done this? Why me? My best friend, the person I thought was my best friend, was gone, and in her place, I was left with a note, that only raised more questions. I didn't know where to go from here, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't giving up until I found out the truth. It was like a riddle with no answers, a dead end with only more questions. I wasn't Sarah. I was someone else, someone you didn't know. That line kept repeating in my head as I stood there in the empty apartment. Every piece of furniture that was gone, every blank wall seemed to mock me. This was where I thought I had known her, my best friend, and now it was all just gone. I had to know who this person was. I couldn't just walk away. I wasn't going to leave it like this. Whoever she was, whoever they were, had been living my life, taking my place in Sarah's world. I was already so deep in this mess, there was no turning back. I took a photo of the note with my phone, just in case. I needed something to go on, but the more I looked at the words, the more I realized how little I knew. I had no idea who Sarah's real family was beyond her mom and dad. All those years, I'd never asked. Was that part of the lie too? Was everything I thought I knew about her, about us, just fabricated? I drove back home with my head spinning. Every part of me was screaming for answers, but I didn't know where to look. The imposter's cryptic note had given me nothing concrete. No name, no hint at why she'd done it. She had said she was someone I didn't know, but that didn't tell me who she was. That's when it hit me. There was one thing I hadn't tried yet. Sarah's family. Her parents must have known something. They were the only ones who could explain this, right? I called her mom again. My voice felt thick with everything I was holding back. It took a while for her to pick up, and when she finally did, she sounded reluctant. "Jenna," she said, her voice quiet, almost apologetic. "Mrs. Smith, I paused, unsure how to even ask. I found a note in Sarah's apartment. She said she wasn't really Sarah. Can you please tell me what's going on?" There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her heart breaking over the phone. "Jenna," she said softly, "I've been avoiding this, but I think you have a right to know. The woman you thought was Sarah. She wasn't the girl we lost." My heart stopped. I was bracing for something, but this wasn't what I had expected. "Who was she?" I asked, barely able to form the words. She was someone hired to take Sarah's place. She was a friend of a friend, someone we met through a mutual contact. After Sarah died, we were desperate. We just wanted someone who could fill the void. Someone who could be Sarah. It was a terrible decision, but it's what we thought we had to do. I was speechless. I could barely process the words. A hired imposter? For years? I took a deep breath. But why me? Why did she choose me to be her friend? Why did she keep this going for so long? There was another pause, longer this time. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight, like she was holding back tears. "Because she got attached to you. Over time, she started to care about you. I think she saw you as someone she could never have. It wasn't just about the lie anymore. She had built her life with you, and I don't think she knew how to let go." I sat there, overwhelmed. A woman who wasn't even Sarah had been living my life with me, pretending to be my best friend, caring about me, but not enough to tell me the truth. It didn't make sense. How had I not noticed? How had I been so blind? "Mrs. Smith," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Do you know where she is now?" There was a long pause. Finally she answered, her voice shaking. "I don't know. After Sarah's funeral, she just disappeared. I think she was running from something, maybe herself. But I'm afraid she's been living under Sarah's name all this time." I ended the call soon after, my mind reeling. Every word Sarah's mom had said felt like a punch to the gut. The truth was darker than I could have imagined. The imposter hadn't just stolen Sarah's life, she'd become a part of it, pretending to be someone she was never meant to be. I was left with one question: what happens now? After talking to Sarah's mom, everything felt like a blur. I had been living a lie, and I couldn't shake the questions. Who was she? And why had she done this? Days passed, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every memory with Sarah felt tainted. The late night talks, the inside jokes. Had any of it been real? I couldn't get past the fact that the person I thought was my best friend wasn't who she said she was. Then, a week later, I got an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject was simple: "I'm sorry, can we meet?" It was from her, the imposter. She wanted to meet. Why now? The message was short, apologetic. "I know I've hurt you, but I need to explain. Please hear me out." I stared at it for a long time, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to ignore it and pretend everything was fine, but I couldn't. I needed answers. I agreed to meet her. We met at a small cafe. When I saw her, I almost forgot she wasn't Sarah. She looked the same eyes, same smile. Only this time, she seemed smaller, more fragile. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. But then, she spoke. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said, voice trembling. "At first, I thought I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't. I hurt you. I'm sorry." I wanted to scream, to demand why she had done this, but she continued, her voice breaking. "When Sarah died, I couldn't let go. I thought if I could be her, everything would make sense again. So I took her place. I didn't think it would go this far." My chest tightened. She wasn't just lying, she was grieving. "And you? You didn't think of me? Of what this would do to me?" I managed to ask. "I never meant to hurt you," she said softly, her eyes welling up. "I just didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I didn't know what to say." Her words were an explanation, but it didn't make the pain go away. The woman who had been my best friend hadn't been her at all. She had been pretending, grieving a life that wasn't hers to begin with. I didn't know what happened next, but I knew one thing for sure. Everything had changed. I left the cafe feeling like I was walking in a daze. The imposter's explanation made me feel for her, but it didn't take away the betrayal. It didn't erase the years I had spent thinking I knew someone who wasn't even real. The person I thought was my best friend, my sister, had been living a lie. And in the end, she had dragged me into it too. I didn't know what I expected when I agreed to meet her. Maybe I thought I'd get some kind of clarity, or maybe I hoped I could find a way to forgive her. But all I was left with was the painful truth. She wasn't Sarah, and no matter how much she apologized, nothing would change that. The weeks that followed were a blur. I cut ties with the imposter, who I had learned was named Emily, by the way, and I tried to rebuild some semblance of my life. It wasn't easy. Everywhere I went, I was haunted by memories of the life we'd shared, but now they were tainted. The photos, the old messages, it all felt like a ghost. The hardest part was coming to terms with the fact that Emily had cared about me. She hadn't just been pretending for the sake of the lie. In some twisted way, she had loved me as Sarah. But I couldn't keep holding on to that. It wasn't fair to either of us. I reached out to Sarah's family, her real family, and we finally met in person. Her parents had known I was in the dark, and they were just as devastated as I was. I realized then that this whole mess had affected everyone, not just me. Sarah's death had left a hole that Emily had tried to fill, and in doing so, she hurt the people who had truly loved Sarah. It wasn't easy, but eventually I found some peace. I couldn't change the past, but I could move forward. I started therapy, began reconnecting with old friends, and slowly, the weight of everything began to lift. Some days, the ache still lingers. I'll always miss Sarah, the real Sarah, and I'll never forget the time I spent with Emily, even if it was all a lie. But I've learned to forgive myself, because at the end of the day, I was just trying to hold on to something real. And sometimes, even the best of us get lost in that search. I don't know what Emily is doing now, or if she's still pretending to be someone she's not. But I know one thing for sure. I'm done looking back. It's time for me to find my own way, without the shadows of the past hanging over me.